All right. How's it going?
Good.
Cool. Normalizing the awkwardness of the video camera, like always. I'm excited to jump right in. Thanks for having me in your class. Sorry. Thanks for having me in your class on Wednesday, I believe, the 8th, yep. I want to just kind of start with, like, we have been working on increasing student engagement and pacing, specifically through, like, coding and annotating. And when I was in your class, it was literally 100% of kids, like, coding and annotating.
Awesome.
Pretty awesome,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, for sure.
So thinking about that, what of your actions led to this, like, increase, like, in all students, like, being engaged and on task?
Like the action.
Yeah, like what did you do that made this particular? Because it's not like you weren't working really hard before. So like, what did you do that made that shift in your class? Do you think?
I think, like one just like actual thing that I've done in the classroom, like within the class period itself, is like some of those like recommendations that you had of having like a kid, like having like pre-coded the text, having it up there, and then being able to scan and walk. And monitor students as it's going on instead of just being posted up in one spot has increased students' annotations. And then I think multiple times practicing it has helped
like
with like clear
practice.
Yeah, and then like clearly naming what it was that they were like, what I was looking for.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's been really good. Today, I want to jump into like independent practice specifically and just like continue to refine and improve on like the quality and sort of like structure of your independent practice.
Okay.
I think that's a logical next step.
Cool.
Sound good? All right. So I want to actually start by looking at a couple pieces of independent practice from Emily Graham.
Okay.
The one and only. I think it's interesting because I think it's like, this is 5th grade. So I want you to keep that in mind.
Okay.
And so like as we shift to thinking about 8th grade and like increased rigor and length and like stamina, I think that'll help us guide like what kids should be producing in each class period. So take a second. I want you to look at, I have 2 pieces of independent practice. This is a CQ.
Okay.
And broken up, like super scaffolded for our 5th graders.
Yeah.
And this is a lesson sort of leading the day before. So we have like one day, day 2. So this is a roadmap, pretty straightforward. And then this is the CQ from the next day. So take a minute and look at these 2, kind of like internalize them. And I want you to, and I'll give you a post-it, kind of craft a CFS for independent practice. And I know it's like a little cheating because we've talked about it before, but I want to ground ourselves in materials.
Okay. What was independent?
Like this whole
This
thing
whole
here,
thing
as
was
well as, and
independent?
so to give you like context here, as well as coding and annotating the text. So coding and like a directed coding and annotating the text came first.
Okay.
After some key points around the setting and conflict relationship, then they were coding and annotating for setting and conflict problems, and then they did this work independently as well.
Okay.
The coding and annotating was also independent for this day. They even read by themselves that day. But. And then the next day they wrote this. For the IP part, like, well, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I don't remember all the things. Try and put it back into words.
Yeah, don't stress on it. Ground yourself too, like honestly, in her work, like in her materials too. Thinking like, and there's a think too, like that this is day 1, this is day 2. right, what you got?
So I think some of the things are having a clear task for what it is that students are supposed to be doing so that they can do it independently, like the CFS that she's got.
So like clear student-facing CFS. Yep.
And this, I would assume, is something that takes a decent chunk of time. So
Yep.
it's a lot of time,
Mhm.
extended time.
Yep.
And I'm thinking about the fact that they have like multiple opportunities to like organize their thoughts, kind of to like a multiple at-bat, I guess, but in a different format, to get the information compiled. And I know there are two other things, but I can't remember. 'Cause that was the day I was sick.
Yeah, no, you're fine. One is, I mean, that's good too.
Okay.
I actually
Yeah.
forgot that you weren't there at that PD, so great.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Cool. So the couple things are missing, so if you want to jot these
Mhm.
down, one is that it's aligned to the standard
Oh, yeah.
name.
I had an acronym in my mind and I couldn't remember what the A was
Yeah,
for, but
yeah,
that should have been.
So it's aligned. The other is that it's scaffolded, which I think the reason why I showed you two was
That
because I
makes
think
sense.
this is such a really good job of scaffolding over 2 days with
Yeah.
like just lots of student work like leading
Uh-huh.
up to it.
That makes sense.
And then aligned, so you got extended, you got CFS. You kind of got to this one, but
Probably can't have nice things.
you kind of got to it, but you didn't name it exactly. The student thinking is made visible because you said
Yeah,
like you
like
can
you
see
see
they had
it.
lots of thought. So
Yeah.
it's like student thinking is visible.
Yeah, okay.
And I think if you would have seen, I think even more would be like that they were underlining problems and then writing what the problem
That-
was and
yeah,
starring setting. And so it
Gotcha,
was like they
like
were
the
seeing it
coding piece.
unfold in the actual text first. So it's kind of like first they just were identifying it, then they shifted to answering, sort of like scaffolded questions that relate to it, and then they wrote basically like an essay, like a mini essay, about the same thing over 2 days. Cool.
Cool.
Awesome. So thinking about that, right? I had some of your materials, but I think like your materials in general are very, pretty similar from day to day in a good way. So take a second and think to yourself, based on that CFS, like where is the gap in your own practice right now? Gap or gaps?
I think everything can always be improved.
Right. Where do you think?
But
Like,
I think
yeah.
I think with like the coding, I think student thinking is pretty visible. 'Cause I think that's helpful. I think that sometimes my CFS is not always the strongest. I think that's an area that I always can work to improve, as well as like the scaffolding piece, because I forget about it, I think, sometimes. So I think I'll push myself on like the clarity and the scaffolding.
Yep. I would say too. Yeah. I think clarity of CFS is like a quick hit because I think like you have that knowledge. I think sometimes you just don't zero in on it as close.
And I don't always. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe like, but I actually, and I'm with you on the scaffolded. I think like thinking more clearly about now that they're really like coding and annotating, like when you know where you're going next. Because sometimes you just do like a cold read, right? And you're like, I want you guys just to read this. We're coding and annotating. We're gathering literal understanding.
Yeah.
That's when you're going to use your structure. But like I think you're right, like a scaffold. Using coding and targeted coding and annotating as a scaffold, definitely. So scaffolding, I think, is the gap. I also want to push a little bit on extended. I think one thing I'm seeing in your classroom is still a bit of a struggle for like students to really be like independently working for like 25 minutes of the class.
Yeah.
Getting better, and like I think you're seeing results from it. Like kids are like more of their stamina. They like it shows up in tests and stuff. So I think we can continue to push on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially as like your management's like gotten a lot is like a lot stronger. Like classroom culture. I think you've got all the ingredients there to kind of let go of the reins a little bit.
Yeah.
which is a little scary. You're
Yeah.
like, I've got control. Now you want me to like just let them work for 25 minutes.
Yeah.
But I think like we can put some stuff in place to make sure your structures stay in place there.
Okay.
So let's so basically, the gap that we're naming. What is the gap then? If you had to kind of restate those things we were just talking about.
Like building an extended time, so having enough time independent, and then the scaffolding piece.
Yeah, with the quick hit.
Targeted. Yeah.
Yeah, and with the quick hit of clarity.
Right.
And I'll say scaffolding, like we can say, I think like one of the ones we'll probably definitely target in on is the coding and annotating. Thinking of that as part of the independent practice
Right.
with coding and annotating that's targeted, but also like also in the practice too, because I think
Okay.
she does a really good job of it here. We see like it's like a very like you could almost answer this question without even reading the text, and so then in a little bit, okay, now let's compare these two, and now okay, now let's do like a TDQ text based, and then now let's go here. So that's the thing we've already been talking about too, is how do we scaffold over multiple days. And
Yeah.
I think the reason why I really thought this was a great next step for you too is like knowing what's coming up next week, that in a minute when we get practicing we can dig into that.
Sure.
Cool. Love it. So based on that, I'm not going to say what's your action step because I think you know what it is. And if you want to write this down, I will share it with you in Western as well. So it's going to be to implement and execute longer independent practice that meets all 5 of the IPCFS. And you're already meeting 3 of them, right? Really, I would argue that your CFS is meeting the criteria. It could be stronger, but by one thing I think we need to do before we do anything here is articulate like an ideal weekly lesson cycle. Like what things need to happen in the week, throughout the week, like vocabulary or whatever, so that when we are like we can begin to integrate those into IP. You know what I mean? Like kids need to do like X amount of independent reading, So once you sort of say, here are the things that I want to include in my like all my lessons, so we can get alignment, but with quick hits. Like you're already starting to do it. Like, oh, determine a quick central idea. Like, the second thing you do is make sure you either determine that you're going to do an exit ticket or an extended IP culminating in a scaffolded task.
Okay.
So like that was the other thing. Like there was no exit ticket here.
Right.
She finished this class with a conversation. That's okay.
Okay.
I think like now that we're moving to that direction, like if it's not an exit ticket type thing, like this is what they turned in. This wasn't an exit ticket, you know, and that's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So kind of thinking what kind of day is it? Is it a day where they have a bunch of at-bats at something and then I give them like a quick multiple choice exit ticket, or is it a day where it's an extended independent practice that they turn in at the end? Draft your agenda that has at least 25 minutes of independent practice. And then create your IP. All right, what's your action step?
To implement and execute longer independent practice that meets all 5 of the CFS by planning out the ideal week, as in what is needing to get covered, determining whether or not it's a exit ticket or IP form today, what works best with that day, and then draft agenda, and then create IP, draft agenda with at least 25 minutes of IP, and then create the IP.
Yep. And I think this is an interesting, like I think this gets to some of it is like, Emily and I were just talking about this, is like, I think we have to be okay with like kind of like 2-day lessons, like a lesson that's like this, and then knowing that the next day you're going to go even deeper into it, because we're seeing better success through that anyway. And it can be the 2 different chapters. Like maybe we still do chapter 1 and chapter 2, but it's like they don't need to be these like totally separate lessons. You can continue to spiral and scaffold up. Like that's part of scaffolding.
Yeah.
That it's like yesterday we did this and it was at this level, and then today we're gonna take it to this level here. Cool. So let's look at. Do you want to pull out next week's, like what you have kind of for next week already? Not that it has to be complete, but I know like right. I mean, even though, but we even kind of like we can even walk through just what we already know you're gonna do. Right?
Yeah.
So I'll be a note taker and I'll give you this as we've been doing. That seems to work well.
Okay.
So let's walk through, you pull up what you need, and let's kind of walk through big picture, what's happening Monday through Friday. This is our central idea revisit day or week, right?
Right, so Monday's the theme lesson.
And what text are we using?
Chapter 7
Okay.
of Claudette, and then nothing on Tuesday.
Oh, conferences.
Yep.
Great.
And
What's
then
Wednesday?
Wednesday is, it's actually the,
Checkpoint?
no, we did it today instead.
Oh,
but it's
great,
the text. I flopped it because of conferences and then the field trip.
It just feels like too much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and again, I didn't think they'd do very well after
Yep.
all that time off. So Wednesday and Thursday are
The close reading.
The close read of the text they have in the checkpoint.
So
which
the
is
aim for Wednesday, what's going to be your objective for Wednesday?
I don't know, because I thought we were gonna talk
Yeah,
about this.
yeah, right. So let's
So-
actually backwards plan. Do you have your prompt yet?
No.
Take a stab at it. What do you? I mean, we talked about it.
Yeah, I can't. I have it written down. I think, or I crafted some sample things.
Statement. Why don't you just
Yeah.
give me one? Like, what statement prompt can you use? Because I mean, there were two parts that we wanted them to do, right? It was determine the what,
Central idea.
and then explain how the.
The author develops it over the course of the text.
Right. I mean, so I think like,
Right.
what's your prompt going to be? Write a brief essay in which you.
Yeah.
So let's write it down. So write a brief essay in which you determine the central idea of the passage and explain how it's MLK, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
MLK
It's letters.
develops his argument supporting this claim. Right, simple. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's just so right, so Park aligned, so rigorous.
Mm-hmm.
So Wednesday, your aim, like the aim needs to be around what? Before they can analyze how it's developed.
We have to figure out the central idea.
Hmm. So it's going to be like determine central idea. The text. I mean, honestly, like you might even be able to do because they're just going to write right on Thursday. So you might even be able to have two aims that day. Like we can craft your close reading materials, and if you want to meet again on Monday, we can adjust to do like a close reading planning lesson.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
So determine central idea of text. Explain how an author develops a central idea.
Mm-hmm.
Which is nice, and they've already read the text.
Right.
So it's like it'll be pretty quick.
Yeah,
getting into
and
it.
they've done pretty darn well with it. So I think they've got kind of like a strong.
Yeah, and I might
Strong
even give them
understanding.
like homework to like reread the text,
Okay.
and code and annotate
On
on to Monday.
Monday. Okay.
Like just be like, guys.
Perfect. It's my reading homework day.
Right, I think
So-
it's like like that would be my push areas, like, and just say like don't spend forever on it. I want you guys to take about 10 minutes, read through this, kind of code and annotate, knowing that we're going to be working on central idea, and then just kind of give them that so that kids who might need that little extra refresher, like if they don't have it, whatever, they've already read it once, but still.
Gotcha.
Okay, cool. And then Thursday it's the same aims, right?
Yeah.
Because they're crafting it, right?
Correct.
Awesome. Great. So then thinking about IP, right? So going through, so for this one, I think we're going to skip step 1, like ideal weekly cycle, because we're like using a close reading cycle, like a 2-day close reading cycle.
Okay.
So I think we kind of, let's like zero in on Monday, because these days we'll do a planning session for.
Okay.
And so this will like, the IP is going to kind of, this is going to be like an all-day
All-
writing, and
right.
this will be TDQs, right? Cool. So we want to do a lesson where students identify the theme of the passage and get at bats, right?
Right.
So you have 54 minutes. So the first step is to craft your time. So how much time you like walk me through your period?
I don't.
I mean 5 minutes of your what,
Do now.
right? Great. And then you're gonna do probably KPs, right?
Yeah.
Because you'll probably do direct instruction
Right,
for
right,
this,
yeah, yeah.
KPs. Plus practice. 10. Read, code for theme. How
Right.
long for that passage? About 20? 15?
15 to. I can't remember how long it is. I would say 20.
Let's do
Just to
20
be
for
safe.
now. So we're at 35
Yeah.
minutes. And then it's going to be like theme, graphic organizer maybe.
Yeah.
And then exit ticket. So that's like, actually that's a day where I wouldn't even like I would just probably like have them determine like do a theme and with that, and then you and I can look at that. That's too is like if you have something where it's like they're going through the process, they've coded and annotated, like you've modeled, they've practiced. We talked about doing some generic practices, and then they just do the theme graphic organizer, and the last thing at the bottom is like based on your graphic organizer, write a theme statement, and then you can go through and see how they did.
Right.
I don't
That
think
makes
they need
sense.
another at that. So that'll be 15. Great. Look, you've got 35 minutes of IP.
Awesome.
My push here would be that you do 10 together, 10
Okay.
independent. That's the other thing you can start pushing yourself on. It's like do
Okay.
like a read aloud for X part with
And
some
then
like stops and pauses and say, all right, now I want you guys to
Okay. Yeah.
read through the rest. Or we can even like based on the chapter, you could try to integrate some of your key points in practice if you are going to chunk the chapter.
Okay.